Alright guys, so what we're going to do now today in this video is we're going to kind of explore building a use case with this new idea of entities and use case. So this is a real use example. I'm going to create a use case for my system, and let me just kind of describe what we're trying to address here. So right now we got a little stage. This is supposed to be a field, and if I select a batter board, I can click and I can drag it around, and wherever I release it, we drop that batter board right there. And you'll notice I add a few buttons, so I'll add another one and we'll add another one. All right, so one of these buttons, the middle one is the trash button. I've already got that hooked up, so if I click on that, it goes away. The one I want to hook up is this drag button. Now think about our structure of things here. Let's see if I can draw. Try this. So we have user input. I'm not going to draw. Just have to use your imagination. So think about our cycle of life. We've got, actually I'm going to pull up a thing. Okay, I found the diagram that I wanted to talk about. So we've got, the cycle of life is right over here, the flow of control that we got going on. So down here, let's just take a look at this. Right here, we got a controller. The controller takes user input, right? That's the key of a controller. It's a click, it's a drag, it's all that stuff. So in your controllers, you're probably going to be writing things like on press, on release, on drag. And then you're going to do things with that data. If it's mouse, you're going to do some math based on changes in the pixels or raycast or hits or something like that. That's all in the controller. But you'll notice the controller talks to a use case. Use case interactor is what he calls it here. So the controller acts typically on a use case, and then that use case adjusts our entities, and then those entities change, and then it ends up coming out to the presenter is how we usually work. We're going to focus over here on the controller. So come back to my demo here. Oh, can I clear those things? Let me clear all. There we go. Okay, so entities. Let me pull up my scripts now. So what let's start over. So what we're going to be doing here is we are going to be trying to hook up this this peel button or this drag button. The idea is you're going to grab, as soon as you click on this point right here, you're going to be able to drag this batter box around, and as you drag it, the other ones will go disabled. And at first glance, so our entities we have. Let's see, where is this? Here's our use cases, or here's our code. Let me close all. Entities. What we have in our entities is we have batter boards, and batter boards are really simple. They're formed. A batter board is an ID, an X position, a Y position, and then a theta, and then a couple other things about appearance and is pickable. We're only worried about planar position, so I don't track the Z position. You can't have a batter board up in the air. We're just doing X and Y on this plane down here. So at first glance, you might think, well, you know what? The X and the Y, those. Why don't we just set this? We have this thing right here in our use case called set position, where you pass in an ID, an X, and a Y, and maybe that's enough. Maybe we don't even need to write a use case because this is in the entity. But there's a few more things we need to be doing that are not necessarily deep core business logic. These are a couple things we need to do. Whoops, I added one. We need to constrain our batter box when dragging to this disk, to our stage. So we need to do some limiting on that, and that limit's going to be a kind of a radius around center, because the center of the world's in the middle of this disk. So applying those limits, that's not necessarily an entity or business level. There's no if you really just think about generic batter boxes, which are batter boards, which is what these things are, they don't need to have necessarily limits, but for our particular application, we do need limits. So that kind of, I think, belongs in a use case. We also, in the future, I don't have it hooked up yet, but in a bit, we're going to be able to hook a string between two of these guys. So if you drag a string, there'll be a string that runs between two batter boards. Also, we're going to be able to hook a tape measure in and hook it and measure out from a batter board. I want those strings, if there is a string connected, I want those strings to be deleted if you move the batter board around, because that's the way it is in real life, right? If you put your batter boards in, you attach a string and you go to move your batter board, your string's going to break. So I want things to be deleted when we move the batter boards. And so that's going to be deleting strings, which is a different entity. It's going to be deleting possibly tape measures, which is another different entity. And so we need to affect multiple entities when we drag. We need to apply some constraints, and we need to affect multiple entities when we drag this batter box or batter board around. So sounds like a great use case, and that we need to write. And then the next video we'll talk about doing the controller side of that thing. So going back to this, what we're going to be writing, oops, I got to switch my pen off. What we're going to be writing is we're going to be writing this guy right here, this use case interactor, and then we'll wire up the controller to work with that use case interactor in the next video. So let's get into it. Let me turn off my pen, and let's just talk through this. We're also going to really get into clean code, or not clean code. I'm trying to delete this stuff. Test driven, all that stuff. So I'm going to show you how I write a use case. Let's do it. So what we're going to need is we're going to need our code. Oops, I got my marker on. Let's stop drawing, and let's bring up our code. Batter boards. All right. So we're going to jump right into our use cases right here. So I got a folder called use cases. And remember, Bob says use cases control the dance of the entities. So we're going to write a use case, and this is where we're deviating a lot from how we used to do it. Use cases are specific to a thing, to an action. When you can think of, we're going to do something. So you can see my other use cases. We've got like delete string, delete batter boards, add tape measure from stake. You know, we have these very specific actions we're trying to do with a use case. And so let's add one. So what we're going to be doing, the action we're trying to do is drag, or let's call it move batter box. TS. All right. Immediately, let's create our tests. We want all this to be test driven, so we're going to do down here. We're going to do a move batter box test.ts. All right. Let's get these two guys open here. Got one over here. I don't know what this is, and we got one over here. Now let's kind of squish this down. Let's get some things out of the way here. Let's put this over here maybe. Now let's go ahead and control. Get rid of our extra stuff. Let's get our tests going. npm tests. Get that going. All right, so first thing, we got to move batter box. This is going to be a function. I'm imagining what's going to happen is we're going to pass in an ID, and we're going to pass in a change in position. So it's going to be a relative change. We're not setting the batter box position. I'm sorry, this is batter board. I do that all the time. It's a batter board. Let's go ahead and change that. And we're not going to set its position. We're going to move it. We're going to bump it, because this is going to be attached to a mouse drag or a stylus drag or a finger drag on the thing. And so we might as well just do that math inside of our use case. So let's go ahead and make our function. This is going to affect an entity that is created, or more than one entities that are created on start. So let's go ahead and create this as a factory. So we're going to do a export function, and in the fact when we make the function, we'll pass in the entities, so you don't have to pass in the entities every time you call this function. So we're going to do a function called make move batter board. Well, we won't fill it out yet, and then we're going to return a function called move batter board. And I can imagine what we're going to need is an ID of the batter board we're trying to move, and that's going to be a string. We're going to need like a move X, that's a number, and we're going to need a move Y, and that's going to be a number. And we're just not going to return anything right now. So that's that. I'm going to go ahead and get rid of the side screen. And then over here, let's go ahead and start making our tests up. Let's get rid of some of this stuff. Move. Oh, shoot, I put that in the wrong script. So let's take this. This actually belongs over here, because this is our actual function, and over here we've got our test. All right, let's get our test pointed to the right thing. So P, we're going to go to move. We're just going to limit our testing to one script. So we're not, because there's a lot of tests going on in this thing, and so we're now just testing move batter board. So first thing I always do when I create a script is we do a function make test rig. All right. I like doing this at the top. Every time I've made a set of tests without using a test rig, I always end up expanding it, going back and having to add this test rig in there because you always end up needing these things. So this is where we kind of set up all our stuff because we know, let's start talking about what we're going to need. We're going to take an ID and we're just going to push it to a new position. So we're going to need batter boards to begin with. So let's go ahead and do a constant batter boards. BOARDS, and that's going to be, I know there's a make batter boards, and so you can see this is coming in from our entities batter boards. We're just making our batter board entity. I'm going to change this to boundary just to get the imports point to the right spot. We're going to need this function over here, so we're going to do this constant make. No, the function is not make move. The function is move batter board. And so we're going to do this move batter boards. It's going to be a make. It's going to call our factory, make move batter boards like that. And we're going to return. We'll just start out by returning these two things. So we're going to have our batter boards, and we're going to have our move batter boards. All right, let's do our very first test. So thinking through this guy. What do we need? Test. Well, let's just do the simple thing it's supposed to do. Let's just test the perfect situation. We're going to take a batter board, and we're going to push it to a new position. All right, so we're going to say batter board is moved correctly. That's all we really need to test at the beginning here. So note cycle of life here, this or how the development's going. This is demonstrating good test-driven development. I'm just writing enough code here to get things to compile. And then we start out by describing the function, the functionality we want to check. Batter board is moved. Okay, it's moved correctly. Maybe we'll take that out. Batter board is moved. That's the test. That's what we're trying to accomplish. So let's constant. Let's make our stuff. Make test rig. All right. So we're making our test rig, and we know we're going to need these two things. We're going to need our batter board and our function to move it. So let's go ahead and create a batter board. So batter board dot create. And we're going to create this one called BB1. And we're going to set it at position 1, 2, and it's going to have a theta, even though the theta won't get changed. Because you can see here, we have, when we create a batter board in the entities, you give it a string for the ID. So this is the string. The ID is going to be batter board 1. The X is the X and the Y position that you want it to be at. And then the theta is the number. So we've created a batter board, and it's at 1, 2, and 3. So now what we expect is we're going to move that batter board. Oops, not move cursor. Move batter board. All right, and we're going to pass in that same one, BB1. And let's move it by, I don't know, let's just pick some numbers. 4 in the X and 7 in the Y. All right, easy peasy. Now what would we expect? We expect we're going to do batterboards.get, and we're going to do BB1 dot X to equal, so we're going to do 4 plus 1. It starts out at 1 and it's going to go plus 4 more in the X. So we're going to expect that to be 5. And we're going to expect the Y, expect batterboard 1 dot Y to equal 2 plus 7 is 9. All right, so now we're failing. Good. So failing. Let's go over here now. And let's look at what we need to do to get this test to pass. So let's start writing the code to do it. Well, we need to grab a batter board to push it, right? So we know we need the batter board entities to grab one. So we want the entities to be baked into our function. So that's part of the factory part of this thing. So we're going to do a batter board, batter boards. And then down here, we're going to do batter boards. Ooh, I got caps on. Batterboards.get, and we're going to get the ID. Now, I already see an error we need to take care of. This could, I know from writing this, you know, what happens if this ID is wrong? So I'm going to throw a little note over here, bad ID error, because we want to handle that, because that's a spot where this could go wrong. So anyways, we're going to expect we get it for now. Constant current position, and we're going to do this batterboard dot No, we're just going to call this board. All right, so we're just going to get the batter board. Then we're going to do this constant new x is going to equal batter board. Wait, what's going on here? Batter board constant, batter board get. We get back batter board. Okay, good. Batter board dot x plus move x. And we're going to do a constant new y is going to be batter board. Why do you not like that one? There it is. Dot y plus move y. All right, and then we're going to return. We're going to do this batter boards dot set position of new x. Wait, we got to get the ID. Nah, not these things. ID. New x and new y. Huh. Okay, that should pass tests. We're not passing, and that's because we have extended our factory to take batter boards. So now we take this guy, and there we go. Okay, great. Next, so we got our first test. We're doing it. Now we start to add our, we know we found a spot where it could go bad. We could expect to throw an error, so let's test that. Test moving a batter board bad ID should throw. So let's just make sure we throw. It's probably all set up to do that, but let's just ensure. So we're going to do this. Actually, we're going to do, well, we're just going to do this. Grab this guy up here. We're not going to need our batter board, actually. We're just going to leave it. We're not going to add a batter board. And we're just going to do this expect. We're going to do a call move batter boards, and we're going to do an unknown unknown to, I don't know, 2 and 5 to throw arrow. Okay. Now, I know from writing this one that this is actually the thing that's throwing an error, but that error gets parculated up. So I think we should always throw errors in use cases and in entities. And then we handle the errors. We catch the errors. We do try catches in the presenter models and in the controllers. So that's where I think things should go as far as like actually catching the error, because after that it doesn't percolate up anymore. So we want the error to happen kind of close to the surface. So, all right, or close to like the outside. So anyways, we're doing good there. All right, what's our next test? Well, one of the things we wanted to do was we wanted to enforce a radius, okay? Now, where do we put that radius? I actually think I can imagine two places. One, we either hold it in a JSON file for app stuff, which might be the best spot, and then we pull it in, or we pass it in when our factory is created. Essentially, this radius, this limit of how far we want to be able to drag these guys, it only needs to be known once. It's not going to be a variable, I don't think, throughout the application. So we don't need to, it could be part of the factory, and we just pass it in, or it could be part of the data. Just for an example, I'm going to show you data. So actually, let's go ahead and do it poorly first, and then we'll go back and we'll circle it into data. I've got from my notes that my radius limit is, what is it, 180? I wrote it down somewhere. Give me 1 second. Wait. Okay, I found out where it was. And here's an example of, this should be stored somewhere. But for right now, we're going to start out doing it bad. So we have a unit. Essentially, if you look at this, the platform, everything's in inches on this platform. And so the radius of this is 180 inches, which is like 15 feet, I think. So we need to limit this to a radius of 180 inches. So let's see what that looks like. Let's start by writing our tests. So let's see. Test. Batter board is limited to a radius of 180 inches. All right. So what do we go? How do we test this? Let's make this go away. So what we'll do is we'll kind of come up here. We'll do the same thing where we'll come in and we'll create a batter board at that and that. Now let's go ahead and let's start out our batter board at 0, 0, 0. Okay, so we're going to start it out at the center. Now what we're going to do is we're going to say move batter board BB1, and we're going to try to push it way out on. We're just going to go in one axis at a time, just so we don't have to do some crazy math with the angles and stuff like that. So if we just move it in the X, let's say we try to go 200 in the X and 0 in the Y, we should expect it to clamp to 180 is what we should do. So now we're going to do this expect, let's grab this guy right here, expect batter board 1X to equal 180, because we're going to clamp it, because that would be a radius, you know, it's just in one axis, so we don't have to worry about doing all that stuff. All right, that should fail, I'm guessing. Get a little room up here. Did you fail? Why is it taking so long? All right, as expected, it failed because we haven't added any code. So let's hide this guy. All right, so what do we need to do? New X, new Y. Okay. Now, we're basing this on a radius, not actually like bounds. So what we need to do is I've got some utilities for finding the magnitude of a vector. Okay. So actually, let's go ahead and we're going to make these into lets because they're going to change, or they possibly could change. Okay. So now what we're going to do is we're going to clamp this so this creates a 2D vector, new X, new Y. Let's figure out the length of that. I know I have a utility for that, so we're going to do constant radius equals, I think it's called vector2 length. Yeah, it is. We're going to pass a new X, new Y. All right. Now, if the radius is greater than 180, we need to clamp it. We need to do something. Okay. So what we do is we'll keep the same direction. So we need to get a unit. So constant unit is going to be vector to unit new X, new Y. So this is just taking that new place we had dragged it to and finding the unit vector pointed at that. And then we just do a little multiplication. So we do this new X is going to equal 180 times unit dot X, and new Y should equal 180 new Y dot Y. All right, so now we've clamped it. So so let's just make sure we work in all of our directions. We did some code here. So let's just throw a bunch of these tests into here. You could work this into individual ones. I'm going to do this all in the same test because I expect it all to be the same. I'm going to essentially run along, and we're going to do, okay, so we did positive X. Let's go ahead and do a negative X. And so now we expect this to be a negative 180. Now let's do a positive Y of 200. And a negative Y of 200. Now what we would expect is this to be 0 because we're positive Y, and we expect this to be that way. And then same down here, 0, and a negative y. All right, I expect that to pass. It did not. Oh, got a little error right here. Now, let's see. Ooh, still not passing, huh? Something failed to run. Let's try saving one more time. Received -20, expected -180. Line, what is this? Line 38. Did I mess something up? Okay. Something's wrong. It's all right. Okay, so line 40. Expect BB1 x to equal 180. Yeah. Pause for a second here. Okay, I figured out what we did. Remember, we're doing relative movement. So when I did this first test, I actually moved it. And then we're doing the second test, and we're moving it from that position. So it's, yeah, it actually is correct, but it's hard to test it and read it. So we should have done what I thought we should have done. I mean, my gut told me we should break these into separate tests. So what we're going to do here is a radius of 1 inch is in the x, in the positive x, and we're going to delete all this. All right, and we're going to do these individually. So then we're going to do, actually, I'm just going to take this guy, and we're going to copy this one several times, 3 more times. So we're just going to do these tests. Now we start fresh, and it's just easier to read them. So we got a positive x. Let's do a negative x. So this is negative, and so this should be a negative. And then this should be a positive y, and this should be a negative y. All right, and so now we're going to do positive y is going to be 0 and 200, and this should be 0, and this should be 180, and then this should be 0 and negative 200, which puts us at a negative 180. All right, that should be passing. All right, cool. Now, if you guys are paying attention, you should be like, look at this 180 we have floating around all over the place. Magic number 180. That's not great, right? That is something like, well, let's say we want a little bigger thing, you know. Suddenly we have this 180 in a lot of places. So let's go ahead and clean that up. So here's kind of a nice thing about test driven is no, let's leave it for now. We'll come back later and clean it up. That's part of the refactor, clean it up. All right, so next things we got to do. If a batter board has a string attached to it, then we should delete the string. That's what should happen. You move a batter board, the string gets deleted. All right, so let's do that. So test if batter board, it is if batter board has a string, it is deleted. All right, let's go ahead and set this up. So just so you guys are aware, that string has to be connected to 2 separate batter boards. So the first thing we need to do is create 2 batter boards. That's the first thing we got to do. So we're going to create batter board 1 and batter board 2. So, and then let's just, even though it doesn't really matter for the math, we're going to set this one at 1, 1, 1. Now, we need to create a string. And so we need to get a hold of a string entity. So let's go ahead and do this. Constant strings equals make layout strings. All right. So this creates our layout strings entities. So let's go ahead and return that. Now, what we should see is batter board. So now we've got this thing called strings we need to bring in. and we need to add a string. So strings dot add, and this takes in an object a little bigger, so we're going to call this string1. We're just going to call it string, and we're going to say the end batter board position is bb2, and the end batter board position is going to be 0. We don't really care about positions. We're going to have a start batter board is going to be bb1, and the start position is going to be 0. All right, now what we're going to do is we're going to move one of those batter boards. Move batter board bb1 by 1, 1. Doesn't really matter at that point. Now what we should expect, since we know that that string was attached to batter board 1, we should expect strings dot get stri, strings dot get all to have length as 0, right? Because we deleted the one string we added, it should be gone because it's attached to that batter board. All right, so let's run over and go back to our move batter boards. Okay, I hadn't really thought through this. Okay, well, we need to get a hold of the strings. So yeah, let's get a hold of the strings. So that's an entity that needs to be passed in. So let's just go ahead and do that. So strings, it's going to be layout strings. Okay. Now we're going to run through the strings. Okay, so if we've moved to batter board, we've got the batter board up here, and we know from that batter board its ID. So now what we're going to do is we're going to run through all the strings and check. So we're going to do this strings dot get all. And we're going to have a string. We're going to run, oh, this is get in the array, and then we're going to do a for each of the strings. So we're going to have a string, pass that in here. So now we got strings. What do we do here? Oh, okay. So now we got a string dot, we're going to do an if. So if string dot in batter board ID is equal to this batter board, to the ID that we're using, or string dot start batter board ID is equal to the ID we're using, then we're going to delete it. And I know there's a use case for this too. So do we want to pass this use case in? I think we do. Let's just going to peek at our use cases real quick. I know we have a delete batter board, and the reason why I'm checking this is it's not just simply deleting a batter board, a string, sorry. The strings are an entity, and a tape measure can be attached to a string. So a tape measure can be attached to a string and pulled off the string, or it can be attached to a corner between, or an intersection between two strings. So if one of the strings gets deleted, we have to delete the tape measure too. So there's a kind of this trickle effect. And I just kind of want to make sure that if I look at the delete strings, any attached tape measures are also deleted. So deleting strings, if we call this function, should take care of all that tape measure stuff going on. So I'm going to pass this use case in during my factory. All right, so up here we're going to not just pass, we're going to pass in more than just the string. We're going to pass in move batter boards. Let's make some room over here. Oops. Let's format this guy. Strings, and we're going to pass in delete string UC, and that's going to be, well, I think it takes in an ID string and it goes to a void. We'll have to verify that, but delete string ID. Now what we're going to do here is we're going to do this delete string UC. We're going to pass in our string.id. All right. Now let me make sure our use case for deleting the string takes that. Delete string, what's the import function? Yep, all we do is pass in the string ID, and it should take care of everything else after that. So let's go back to our move batter boards test. B. Now, what we're going to do here now is we pass in our strings. Good. Okay, we also need our delete string use case passed in too. And instead of trying to test all that and make sure that's all, we don't necessarily want to link this test to that action, we expect that use case to be fully tested and functional. We should not make any assumptions about what that thing does, and we kind of expect it to delete a string, but it could do more things, and it might need more setup and all that stuff. So we're not going to actually use in our test. We're just going to use a jest mock. So constant delete string UC is going to be equal to a jest dot function. All right, and we're going to pass that in, and then we're going to pass this back. It's one of our tests. Now let's come back down here. Instead of checking to see if our use case, our string is empty, what we're going to do instead is we're going to do this. We're going to grab this function and we're going to check it and make sure it was called. Because, yeah, we're leaving that, compartmentalizing our tests, right? All we're testing here is this move Batterboard test, and we know it needs to call the use case. We don't care what it does. We don't care the final outcome of the use case. If we were to check things about the use case, then we become linked and things could change, yada, yada. So what we're going to do is we expect that delete string use case to be called with string. And just to make that a little more clear, let's make this string 1 like that. Okay, so that's our test now. And the reason why, so we're going to expect our delete string use case to be called with, and we're going to pass in, we expect it to be called with string 1 because we expect this string to be deleted. All right, we are not getting called. Test suite failed to run. Oh, we have an error. What's going on? Oh, yep, here we go. All right, expect this to pass, and we do. All right, sweet. Let's see. Anything else? I think this might be about it as far as like the functionality. We don't actually, I said earlier we might have a tape measure attached. We don't currently have tape measures attached to Batterboards. If we were to have that functionality, we would need to delete any tape measures attached to this Batterboard. We might add that in. I mean, that's pretty common. You like pull a tape measure across stuff. So we're not going to worry about that right now. So we've got our test running. Let's go back to refactoring. So this looks pretty good. Let's look at is this readable? If radius is bigger, this could almost be moved into its own function, but we'll leave it alone for now. Yeah, let's make this a little more readable just to kind of function. So no, let's leave it alone. Okay, one thing we can do though is if you guys are noticing, you probably saw this, we hard coded a 180 in here, and that's just it's bad. Hopefully that tickles that spider sense that says you shouldn't be doing that. Anything, we should do maybe a constant of radius, max radius, something like this would be 180, and then use that in here like this, or something. This is really poor. You can imagine this is not great. So where I'm going to end up putting this is a variable. I mean, it's a configuration, I would call it. Like it might change if we get down the road and we decide that our stage needs to be bigger than 180 inches in a radius. Let's say we want to make it 200 or something. So, and it's used a lot of, I can imagine it being used a lot of places. So the way I like to do it is I have this data folder out here where we put JSON. And we have this thing called app parameters. And I am going to add one in here called stage radius. And we're going to set that to 180. There we go. Now, what you can see is we could actually be setting up our stage based on this. We've suddenly got this in a central source of truth about how big our stage is, and that's at the ground plane that we're talking about. All right, so now I'm going to come back to use cases, move batter board. I'm going to bring in this guy. So we're going to do import stage. Actually, let's go ahead. Before we do this, let's test this. Let's write our test first. So over here, let's do this. Let's bring in import app parameters from P-R-A-M-E-T app parameters from let's go up we gotta go up to the data app parameters. All right, so batter board, here's our test. Batter board is limited, all of these. Okay, batter board is limited to the stage now. This is going to be equal app parameters dot stage radius. All right, and we're going to do this for this one and this one and this one. Now it's still working because we happen to pick the same one, but let's just get it to break so that we can test and make sure it's working right. So we'll temporarily set our app parameters stage radius to 150. Now I'm betting these things are going to fail because our stage radius is wrong. There we go, 4 failed as expected. So let's get our test to run, or let's get our test to work. So move batter board, here we go. Let's go make this a little bit bigger. So now let's go ahead and grab that same piece of data. Import app parameters from we need 2 dots, data slash app parameters. There we go. Now we can replace all this with, I'm gonna make this a little easier to see. Constant radius, max radius. It's going to equal app parameters dot stage radius. Okay, so now we can replace this with this, and this. There we go. We're passing. So nice little refactor. Let's go ahead and set our data back up to that app parameters dot JSON. Back up to 180. All right, cool. I think that's a fully. Oh wait, let's do our last little thing. Kind of a new concept I've been working on. Oh geez, 43 minutes. Sorry guys. Last little bit I've been working on is this use case context. Actually, I'm going to split that off into a separate little short video. All right, see ya.